I am going to embarrass myself. I'm going to take a sip of my Capitalism is Boss coffee mug. I was trying to wrap my head around some of these attacks on Mitt Romney. And I noticed that the Democrats started this. Republicans have joined in. Now here's the pile-on. And I thought, what is needed here is a pop culture reference. Something that everybody is culturally aware of. And then when I realized that I had it, I realized how pathetic it was that I knew this. It's kind of like knowing the words to a song that's awful. You don't know why you know them. You don't know where you pick them up. But you're someplace, like in an elevator or whatever, and you hear some cheesy 70s love song, and for some reason, you know the words. It's like, oh, baby, come back, do-do-do, only a fool can... Why do I know this? Well, I found a pop culture reference to explain this whole Mitt Romney Bain Capital thing. Now, the funny thing is, when this movie came out, people loved this movie. They adored the characters in this movie. Now, I'm going to give you a hint. Do you have the song that goes with the movie? Yeah, play the song that goes with the movie. Remember in 1990, there was a movie called Pretty Woman? Does anybody remember what the lead character, Richard Gere, did for a living in the movie? Pretty Woman. Anyone remember that at all? I mean, the soundtrack. I mean, this was like the beginning of this was like right at the height of the growth of adult contemporary radio. There was that song, Wild Women Do. I mean, this made Julia Roberts America's sweetheart, all that stuff. Here's a little clip from the movie, Pretty Woman. Why I knew this, I have no idea. It popped into my head when I was doing my 5-mile run this morning. If you need a pop culture reference to understand Bain Capital, play this clip of audio.
You don't sleep, you don't do drugs, you don't drink, you hardly eat. What do you do, Edward? Because I know you're not a lawyer.
That's right. There are 4 other chairs here.
Oh. So what do you do?
I buy companies.
What kind of companies?
I buy companies that are in financial difficulty.
If they have problems, you must get them for a bargain, huh?
Well, the company I'm buying this week, I'm getting for the bargain price of about $1 billion.
$1 billion?
Yes.
Wow. You must be really smart, huh?
Let's see, we got a guy who doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't do drugs. I can't explain why he'd be in a lavish hotel suite with a hooker, but even the hooker, go back and find the part in that again if you can. Even the hooker, Julia Roberts, gets it. He says, I'm buying, you don't have to play it again. I'm buying companies that are in trouble. And she says, well, you probably get them for a bargain. Yeah, that's what happens. That's what happens when your business is in trouble and you need it to be rescued. You sell it to somebody else at a bargain. The reason why somebody like Richard Gere in the movie Pretty Woman would buy your business is because they have the reasonable expectation based on their understanding of business and economics that they could solve the problems of your business, make that business profitable, and then resell the business. When this movie came out, it was like, women were in love with this movie. I mean, here was this big, they referred to him as a corporate raider. There's one scene in the movie where he explains how he moves money from one place to another. There's a scene where they're showing, slides of some like oil company or a loading or a freight company or something. But that scene, I don't know why the hell I remember that scene. Please don't ask me to explain. I'm already embarrassed enough. But when that movie came out, the idea of this big wig corporate raider character falling in love with the street hooker in the thigh-high patent leather boots, everybody was in love with it. Granted, it was totally unrealistic. Fine. But I mean, well, I don't kiss. And then there was the thing with the champagne and the strawberries. And everybody remembers when he opens the box and there's like the $1 million necklace and he slams it shut before he, and it's Julia Roberts and Richard Gere with a pretty woman. That's Mitt Romney. Minus the hooker. 1-866-695-PATRIOT. Maybe someone ought to explain this to Newt Gingrich. Because now Newt Gingrich is backtracking big time. I mean, this has been picked up by everyone now. The president's in on it. Richard Trumka's in on it. Everybody's piling on Mitt Romney now. Oh, the new one? The new one is somehow trying to link Mitt Romney to the things that Bain Capital does now. Like advise Obama on the auto bailouts. I got news for you. Mitt Romney has not been with Bain Capital for like 20 years. You know, I worked for TCBY when I was in high school. If you happen to get food poisoning at TCBY, it's really not my fault. I got news for you. 1-866-695-PATRIOT. Play that clip. Play cut one. This is Newt. Backtracking.
That in 1994, running for the Senate, he claimed to have created 10,000 jobs, and then he wasn't at Bain Capital in a management role after that, and they said they couldn't find any evidence that he'd created 100,000 jobs. Now, remember, working with Clinton, we created about 11 million jobs, so a pretty big difference in scale. But, so I've asked questions about...
Wait. So, the government that has its own evidence machine, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, you can quantify how you and your friend Bill Clinton, air fingers, quote, created jobs. Back to this, the government created jobs thing versus businesses that actually have tasks to be performed or by trimming the fat of a company, maintain tasks to be performed. That's not job growth. The government creates jobs. Now, some might say, well, Reagan is lauded for creating jobs. No, Reagan's policies helped create jobs. Keep playing it.
That in 1994, running for the Senate, he claimed to have created 10,000 jobs, and then he wasn't at Bain Capital in a management role after that, and they said they couldn't find any evidence that he'd created 100,000 jobs. Now, remember, working with Clinton, we created about 11 million jobs, so a pretty big difference in scale. But so I've asked questions about, let's look at the record. Let's see the details. Don't just give us the claim. Show us what actually happened. That somehow got turned into, questioning capitalism, which is baloney. This guy's running for president. He's making a set of claims. He based a lot of it on his career. If you ask about his career, it's because he's running for president. I think he owes the country a much more detailed answer about what his career was like, what decisions they made, because we're looking at the judgment, the values of a particular person, not of a system, but of one guy, Mitt Romney, who wants to be president.
Whether the person gives themselves an R, a D, liberal, conservative, I really don't want to hear criticism of doers from thinkers. I'm not going to take away Newt's title as thinker, but Romney's a doer. Now, here's another thing. And I just thought of this while filling the Capitalism is Boss coffee mug just a few minutes ago. This title that we give people of thinker, you hear when Newt's an intellectual. Newt's an intellectual. That's why the Democrats are okay with Newt, because he's kind of an intellectual. He's very professorial. He's a good debater. Well, previous to these attacks on Romney's record at Bain Capital, I like that about Newt. But here's the problem. When Newt attacks Mitt Romney for Bain Capital, it's an air fingers, quote, thinker attacking an air fingers, quote, doer. And what's funny about the thinker versus the doer is the thinker thinks that doing is pedestrian. The thinker's entire role in society is to think. That's all I'm supposed to do. I think. I get it. You think, therefore you. I think, therefore I am. But to actually laud yourself for not taking the next step and doing is silly to me. And I'll explain why, for all of you liberals that put such a premium on thinking versus doing. You ready for this? This is going to blow your mind, man. This is totally going to be a blow your mind, man. You want to know what the real difference between the thinker and the doer is? Because one is a doer doesn't mean he's absent of his own thoughts. But a thinker is absent of his own actions. That's the difference. You see, a doer can be a thinker, but rarely can a thinker be a doer. That's the problem. You see, a doer does what he or she does based on his thoughts. A thinker is limited to his thoughts because, well, for some reason, his thoughts are never put into action. And when they are, and if they fail, like Christina Romer, we never blame the thinker. That's what's so hysterical. Now you're hearing from all of the liberals, all of the so-called thinkers, that the problem with the stimulus package was it wasn't big enough. Well, you controlled the House, you controlled the Senate, you controlled the White House. Why didn't you just make it big enough the first time? In other words, the thinker never blames him or herself and is never blamed. Why? Because we have been so impressed by somebody who's called an intellectual. Except define intellect for me. The funny thing is, one doesn't have to possess intellect to be an intellectual. They just have to self-elevate themselves to a thinker and look at the doer as pedestrian and show disdain for the doer. But the doer is also a thinker. The thinker just isn't a doer. And yet, in our society that has transformed itself from an intellectual society to a pseudo-intellectual society, we're so impressed by the pseudo-intellectual, and we call that person a thinker. Again, the old insanity is the new sanity. Take that quote again. Take that quote again. The doer isn't absent of his thoughts. The thinker is absent of his actions. 1-866-95-PATRIOT, or action in general, which is why we only call the person a thinker. You can't do without thinking, but you can think without doing. Wow, that was a pretty good segment right there, right? We had this sort of surface level pop culture reference to the movie Pretty Woman, and then right down to the depths of philosophy explaining the failures of one who is called a thinker versus one who is considered a doer. You get it all in this program, don't you? 1-866-95-PATRIOT.